Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have some very specific autumnal book recommendations for you. I was making this list and I thought to make it more fun, I wanted it to be very specific recommendations. So I love the videos where people recommend books for people who love something. And so I thought that if I geared it towards autumnal recommendations and I tried to find a book for every type of reader. So whether you like classics, contemporary, literary fiction, mystery, crime, thrillers, fantasy, young adult, middle grade, then I hope that there is something here for you. And these are books that I adore, that I think are perfect for the autumnal season, and I can't wait to tell you all about them. So without further ado, I'm going to break down these book recommendations for people who blank. The first category I have is books for people who believe in ghosts. So because I have so many books to talk to you about, I have about 22 or 23, I'm not going to give you exact synopses of each one, but I am going to break down some elements, themes, and aspects of the story that I think would be beneficial to know before going in. So anyway, the first ones are books for people who believe in ghosts. The first one that we of course have to start with is The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is one of my favorite classics. It of course has phantom in the title, so if you believe in ghosts, if you love ghost stories, you have to read The Phantom of the Opera if you haven't. This is an incredible French classic, and it just has everything in it that you could want for the autumnal season. It has ghosts, it has murder, it has a mystery, it has beautiful atmospheric writing, and this story will just completely capture you. It's so enthralling, it's so enchanting, and you will just be completely pulled into the story. And I think it's a perfect mix of spookiness but not outright scary, and I just loved it. So highly recommend Phantom of the Opera, especially for the autumnal season. Next I have is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. This is my favorite Shakespeare play, and of course we have the ghost. Hamlet's father comes back in ghost form to tell him that he has been murdered, and it leads Hamlet into wanting to avenge his father's death and everything that leads to that. Of course, with a lot of Shakespeare tragedies, we have a lot of murder, but we also have a lot of ghosts. And in particular, we have Hamlet's father's ghost. And this, again, it's so atmospheric. It is just brilliantly written. I highly recommend reading this if you are newer to Shakespeare. I do always recommend with Shakespeare to watch an adaptation before reading the play or while you read the play, because I do think it really enhances the reading experience. And how more autumnal can you get than this cover? The next ghostly book I have is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is such an atmospheric book, and we do have an element, there's a ghostly element to this story, and I think that the first paragraph, even the first sentence, is a perfect introduction to the autumnal season, and you will see why. A secret's worth depends on the people from whom it must be kept. My first thought on waking was to tell my best friend about the cemetery of forgotten books. So this is, again, a very ghostly story. We have a mystery throughout it, we have beautiful atmospheric writing, and we have this character trying to uncover a mystery surrounding this forgotten author and this particular book that he absolutely adores. I think that the mystery elements, the ghostly elements, there is a bit of murder in this story as well. It's so expansive. This book feels like you've read it for years and years, because it feels like you're so enraptured in the story and the years that take place during the story, but you will be completely hooked and you will fly through it, yet while you're in it you'll feel so completely just closed in by the whole story itself, and that is such an amazing feeling, especially for the autumnal season. So highly recommend this book, especially if you love ghosts. Then the next one I have is an all-time favorite, and that is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This also has The Rocking Chair. This is a Little Black Classics edition, and it is number 42. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, especially The Yellow Wallpaper, I love everything that she does. For the yellow wallpaper and the rocking chair, we do have some ghostly elements. We have, on the back it says perfectly, this horrifying semi-autobiographical feminist story of imprisonment and madness, scandalized 19th century society. That in particular is talking about the yellow wallpaper. We have wallpaper that is coming to life in a way. We have madness. Is she mad? Is she not mad? Is she being held there against her will? It's such an incredible story without giving too much away. And the rocking chair also is very ghostly, very spooky, will keep you on the edge of your seat. You don't exactly know what's going on. Something haunting is happening, but you don't really know what. And it is just brilliant. So cannot recommend the yellow wallpaper enough. And the rocking chair. Charlotte Perkins Gilman is just a feminist icon and just a literary icon in general. If you haven't read this, I can't recommend it enough. It will take you no time at all to read because it is so short and absolutely perfect for this time of year. Then the next one I have is, of course, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. If you love ghosts, you will love, in particular, one character's ghost. There is death, and then someone comes back to life as a ghost. Of course, we have the iconic line, "You said I killed you, haunt me then." And that is from Wuthering Heights. This is the absolute perfect fall book. I think Emily Bronte is one of the greatest writers we have had. And the fact that this is her only novel breaks my heart every time I think about it. And this just has, it has death, it has ghosts, it has that spooky setting, it has beautiful atmospheric writing, it has everything you could want for the autumnal season. And it's just the perfect time to read it. So if you haven't read it, or if it's one of your favorites, I highly recommend you pick it up. If you haven't read it, if you love it, I can't recommend rereading it for this time of year because, of course, it is the perfect autumnal book. So ghosts, death, candlelight, spooky settings, haunted houses that aren't haunted but they feel haunted, just everything, absolutely everything about this book. Then the last book for people who love ghosts, and that is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. The Turn of the Screw is one of those books that will leave you with this face. It'll make you feel so just, what is happening? What is going on? Am I being manipulated by the narrator? What is happening? And that is honestly one of the best feelings to have as a reader. I love feeling confused, but purposefully confused, because you know what's happening, but you don't know who to believe, who to trust. Is this really happening? And it is fantastic. So we do have a ghostly element, we have a mystery, and we also have an unreliable narrator, and that can be really interesting. I love unreliable narrators because as a reader, you rely on the narrator telling you certain things and revealing things about the story and the world to you so that you understand them. But when it's coming from an unreliable narrator where you don't know if you can trust the person that you're following, it leaves you very uneasy, and I think that's a great feeling for the autumnal season. The Turn of the Screw also has a wonderful adaptation called The Haunting of Bly Manor, which did take some artistic liberties and changes. I really enjoyed that miniseries. I get scared really, really easily, but I know that The Haunting of Bly Manor and The Haunting of Hill House have some amazing miniseries to go with them, which I highly recommend. If you like that stuff, if you get quite scared easily, I would steer clear. I am quite a baby, but I can handle some things. Anyway, The Turn of the Screw is amazing for this time of year and cannot recommend it enough. The next category is for people who love a splash of murder. The first book I have is, of course, the absolute classic of a Russian novel, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky, I think, is perfect for the fall and autumnal season because it is everything that you could want. His stories are murderous and haunting and depressing and dark and gloomy and vivid and every adjective that goes with autumn, and it's just incredible. He is such a master. And so I have Crime and Punishment here because, of course, Crime and Punishment involves quite a lot of murder, and also what then is the result of that murder and how it manipulates the thought process and I guess the psychology of the person that commits the murder. And it is just an incredible book. I definitely want to reread it soon. I would love to reread it this fall, but will I have time? That is always the question. But I love Crime and Punishment, and I cannot recommend it enough. Another one that I think is perfect for anyone who is newer to Dostoevsky and you want to dip your toe in, but you're a little daunted by Crime and Punishment, which I completely understand, that is Notes from Underground, but also by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and also The Double. Any Dostoevsky short story as well. I was going to recommend White Nights because White Nights is my favorite Dostoevsky short story novella, but I think these two are a bit more murderous and a bit more autumnal, so that's why I'm recommending them. But again, spooky, haunting, depressing, dark, gloomy, just everything you could want from an autumnal read, and that is what Dostoevsky is. Another story full of murder is Perfume by Patrick Suskind. I love this book. This book, again, perfect for fall. It is so, again, atmospheric, gloomy, dark. The concept is brilliant. It is about this young boy who we follow throughout his life, becomes an older man. He was born with a very acute sense of smell, and he wants to capture the smell of the essence of a virgin, and that leads him to some murderous acts. This story, you feel so uneasy while reading it. You feel not disgusted, but I guess kind of grossed out. The things that he does, the way that he thinks, the way that he describes the world with his acute sense of smell, everything is so heightened, everything is so potent. Even though this is a story that you're just reading in your own space, you feel like everything that he describes, all the smells that he smells, you can almost smell them yourself. And it is just incredible. There's also an amazing movie adaptation, and this is just seriously the perfect book for the autumnal season. I will read the back because I want to make sure that I do this book justice because I think all of you should read it. Jean-Baptiste is abandoned on the filthy streets of 18th century Paris as a baby, but grows up to discover he has an extraordinary gift, a sense of smell more powerful than any other human's. Gradually, he learns how to exploit this gift in the art of creating the most sublime perfumes in France. Yet there is one odor he cannot capture, the scent of an innocent young virgin. In order to perfect his experiments, he must have this final ingredient at any cost. A cult international bestseller, Perfume is a bewitching, darkly humorous fable of desire, obsession, and death. Absolutely perfect for this time of year. Please, please read it. It is incredible. Love it so much. I really want to reread it right now. Then I have We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This also has an adaptation, but I haven't seen it yet, but I have heard people do enjoy it. Not The Haunting of Hill House. I haven't read The Haunting of Hill House. I want to. I was terrified by the miniseries adaptation, which made me nervous for the book, but a lot of you said recently that the show is a lot scarier and quite different from the book, and the book is more psychological, which I love psychological books, not so much jump out scary. Anyway, so We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Again, we have some murder, but we don't know who commit this murder. We know that there is death. We don't know much about the death. What Shirley Jackson does so brilliantly is she gives us pieces of the story without giving you the full picture. So you're slowly trying to put things together. We have this community where these two sisters are outcasted. We have this beautiful setting of the castle, or this big house, this manor house that they live in, which is quite dilapidated after a certain point, and the way that they live their lives is quite sinister. And we have of course, a cat. What is the cat's name? Jonas, that's his name, Jonas. Okay, anyway, I adore this book. I think it's perfect for anyone who is interested in a quite sinister, gloomy, atmospheric read, but you don't want something too scary. Then the next book, filled with a lot of murder, is actually a middle grade series, but I will just recommend you the first book, and that is The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket. Lemony Snicket, I adore him. I adore his books. I think he's brilliant. I love the series of Unfortunate Events. I'm actually working my way through reading them for the first time because I just grew up watching the movie with Jim Carrey, and I never read the book before, or the series before, and I am loving it. I wish that my younger self read these because I feel like young Carolyn would have loved them. But anyway, A Series of Unfortunate Events is about the Baudelaire orphans and how their parents are killed in a house fire. Their house burns down and they are killed. But is there more to the story than that? Is there more to their deaths than that? Willow is barking. This is also following the very sinister character of Count Olaf, their guardian who doesn't stop following them. What I love is how hilariously gloomy this book is. The things that happen to these orphans is so heartbreaking and is so sad, and you just want things to work out for them because we are always used to a bad thing happens and then there is a beneficial outcome where things work out. But what Lemony Snicket wanted to do with this series was to just have bad things constantly happen, and in a way where it's entertaining and gloomy but funny. There is so much lightheartedness in such a sad series of events, and I just think that this story is brilliant, perfect for anyone of any age. A lot of murder, a lot of death, a lot of gloom, a lot of atmospheric writing, but also funny and darkly funny, and for younger audience I think that that is so amazing. So love it so much, cannot recommend enough. The book that I am currently reading and adoring for any fantasy lover, if you haven't read it, it's so well read. You probably have read it. If not, please read it. That is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I started watching this show recently on a random whim because I was working a lot and I wanted something that I had to pay attention to visually, because with my job as a content creator and an illustrator and a writer, a lot of my work I can do while multitasking. So even if I put on a show, like I love watching Gilmore Girls, if I put Gilmore Girls on in the background, I can do other things while watching Gilmore Girls. So I wanted a show that I needed to pay attention to and that would keep me engaged, and I thought Game of Thrones. I've heard so many people talking about it, and I'm the kind of person that when something is super hyped, I don't want to be in the hype with everyone else. I kind of want to wait for the hype to die out and then I'll go to it. And that's what I did with Game of Thrones. And part of me now kind of wishes that I did start it earlier so that I was part of the hype, because sometimes being part of the hype can be fun. Anyway, now I am reading it and now I am adoring it. If you want to watch me start it, then that is part of the 24-hour readathon that me and my best friend Emma just did when I was visiting her in Toronto. I am absolutely obsessed. Willow is also obsessed with Game of Thrones. It is just a lot of murder, a lot of ghosts, a lot of fictional characters, a lot of whimsy, atmosphere, darkness, gloom, winter. Winter is coming, of course, and just these characters are so complex. There are so many people that you love to hate and that you love to love, and that you are devastated by when they ultimately die, because so many people die in this story, and it is just, there's a lot of death, a lot of murder, and I'm so glad that I'm reading it, especially in this time of year, because I think it is a perfect autumnal read, and it is just everything that you could want, I think, in a fantasy. I'm not the biggest fantasy reader. In that 24-hour readathon vlog, I did ask for your fantasy recommendations, which you gave me a bunch of, so thank you so much. But if you are also a fantasy reader and maybe you didn't want to join the hype, you wanted to see if the book was really worth the hype, if you care about my opinion, I highly recommend you pick up Game of Thrones, or if you love it, reread it for this time of year. If you're waiting to reread it, then this could be the perfect time to do so. It is just brilliant. I think my number one favorite character is Tyrion Lannister, but I do love Daenerys and Arya and Robb Stark and Jon Snow and Jorah Mormont, who I have the biggest crush on. And I just love this book so much, so highly recommend. Think it's perfect for this time of year. And the last one for people who love a splash of murder is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a quintessential gothic tale. This book is a quintessential autumnal read. You have to read it if you haven't. It is one of the most beautifully written classics ever. This is also a fantastic book for people who are newer to classics. We have Dorian who gets his portrait painted. He sees how beautiful he is and how the portrait will always stay young and beautiful, and he will grow old and lose his beauty. And so he sells his soul to the devil to remain young forever, and for the painting to capture all of his sins and to grow old and weary instead of his actual being. So the painting takes on all of his sins and his faults and his age. The atmosphere, the way that Oscar Wilde writes about art and painting, as an artist, I adore it. And this is just so gothic and gloomy and atmospheric, and you are on the edge of your seat and you want to know more. And it, like I said about all these books, perfect for this time of year. And if you haven't read it, please, 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 please read it. If you love it, read it again. This is one of the most brilliant books I've ever read. And if you're waiting for the perfect time to read it, now is that perfect time. The next category only has 2 books, but that is for people who identify as witches. Of course, if you identify as a witch, you have to read The Crucible by Arthur Miller. This is the witch story, the witch play. And I actually read this because of Rory Gilmore. I am participating in the Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge. I have a lot of Rory Gilmore videos, and The Crucible is one book that she has also read, and that was the main reason why I read it, and I adored it. I definitely want to watch an adaptation, because something that I love doing with plays is, of course, watching an adaptation after or before reading it, and this is, of course, about the Salem witch trials. So on the back it says, Arthur Miller's classic parable of mass hysteria draws a chilling parallel between the Salem witch hunt in 1692, one of the strangest and most awful chapters in human history, and the McCarthyism which gripped America in the 1950s. The story of how the small community of Salem is stirred into madness by superstition, paranoia, and malice, culminating in a violent climax, is a savage attack on the evils of mindless persecution and the terrifying power of false accusations. This is perfect for anyone who loves anything autumnal. And I just think it's so fascinating to think that these events actually happened. I think that's what I was so taken by when I read this story. They actually occurred. That just blows my mind. I also feel like this is a great book if you love Hocus Pocus. I love Hocus Pocus. I'm very excited for the new Hocus Pocus. Can't wait to watch it. But anyway, yes, if you identify as a witch, you have to read The Crucible. Then the next book I don't own a physical copy of, but I have it in a bind-up of Shakespeare plays, and that is Macbeth. Of course, we have the very iconic witches in Macbeth, and you can't love witches and not read Macbeth. It's just, you just have to do it. I'm telling you, you have to do it. So please do it. Macbeth is fantastic. It also has murder and ghosts, and I think it is perfect for this time of year. And of course we have the iconic spell from the Witches of Macbeth. I don't want to butcher it, so I am going to read it off of my phone. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. If you love witches, you have to read Macbeth. It's a rule that I am enforcing. The next category is books for people who want to cry by candlelight. So devastating books. I love a good devastating book, especially in the fall, because I just feel like I think it's perfect for that time of year. The first book is one of my all-time favorite books, absolutely ever. I read it this year. It is my favorite book of the year so far, and I am actually reading another book right now by the same author, and I am adoring it. He is becoming one of my favorite writers, and I cannot recommend this book enough. And that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I am currently reading Clara and the Sun. I will grab it. I picked it up when I was in Canada with Emma, and I just started it 2 days ago, and it is taking my breath away, and I am loving everything that Ishiguro writes. So Never Let Me Go I am recommending in particular for the autumnal season, because this book is so devastating. The concept is brilliant. The writing is unlike any writing I've ever read. I say that about a lot of writers, but it is just so unique. We're following this character, Kathy, who Like I said about Shirley Jackson, Ishiguro gives us things through Kathy. She tells us things without telling us things. She gives us a little without giving us anything. She explains the world without explaining the world, and we're always wanting more. We're always wondering what is happening, because you feel like what is happening isn't what is actually happening, and they don't give you the full picture. And that's what I love, because it will always keep you wanting more. It will always keep you guessing. There is a good amount of death in this book. Death as a theme. It is the thing that, I guess, centers everyone. In life in general, but especially in this book, how the characters are put into this certain circumstance where death is inevitable, but in a way where it's different from how death is inevitable in general. It is just the most brilliant book, one of the most brilliant books I've ever read, in concept, in writing. This book, I think, is the book that has made me cry the hardest ever. It is the book that has made me cry the most. And the atmosphere, even the movie, I love the movie. The scenery, the color palette of the film, the costume design, it is just so autumnal. I can't recommend you read this book enough. I can't recommend you watch the film enough. These are one of the books, if you get anything out of this video, read Never Let Me Go. Especially that I'm reading and loving Clara and the Sun. Ishiguro is just a genius. He is just a master of uniqueness. He is a master of breaking your heart. He is a master of the literary form. And I love him, and I love Never Let Me Go. If you want to cry by candlelight, and if you love a devastating read, especially for the autumnal season, please pick up Never Let Me Go. Another book that will absolutely break your heart and devastate you in the best way possible is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Can we first of all talk about this cover? I feel like this cover is absolutely gorgeous, especially for this time of year. I just adore it. Those leaves, amazing. This is from the Penguin Great Loves series. James Baldwin will take your heart out of your body, hold it in his hands, and crumble it into a million itty-bitty pieces through this book. The writing, exquisite. The plot, heartbreaking. The story, devastating overall. It is just an incredible, incredible read. I have a really hard time talking about this book and about what it's about, because it's so short, and because I feel like reading it for yourself, being captured by the story, I don't know, I don't want to give you too much. It's about these two men who have this relationship with one another, and how that relationship affects themselves, their psyches, it's how it affects their lives, but it's so much more than that. And my favorite thing that I love about this book, that I always talk about whenever I talk about this book, is how Giovanni's Room, I love the title because Giovanni's Room as a room has the most important role on the relationship and on the emotional effects of the characters. The room really symbolizes so much of what they're going through. Please read it. James Baldwin is a genius, and this is one of the most beautiful, devastating books I've ever read. Then the last devastating read could also be in a subgenre of devastating reads that will make you cry by candlelight, but have a dark academia setting. This is a book for people who love dark academia, but don't love The Secret History, don't love If We Were Villains, don't love a lot of the typical dark academia books. I loved dark academia a few years ago, and then I kind of got out of it because it almost felt like all the dark academia books were doing the same thing, and it wasn't really creating anything new. But a book that I think is very dark academia and that not a lot of people talk about, that I think is brilliant and probably the best dark academia book I have ever read, that is A Separate Peace by John Knowles. This is about an all-boys school. We have our two main characters, Jean and Phineas, and how Jean, our narrator, really idolizes his best friend Phineas, and how the setting of the all-boys school and their friendship, how they affect everything around them. This has aspects of war in it, and how the war affects them, and how one act, I don't want to say what the act is, how how something that Jean does affects everything else in the story, and you really don't know, is Jean idolizing Phineas? Is Jean in love with Phineas? What is happening here? I got so enraptured by this story, so emotionally taken by this book, and the setting is beautiful. It is just so masterfully done. I think a modern classic, and I wish more people read it. I do know people read it in high school, but I didn't read it in high school, and it's one of those books that I just feel like everyone should read, especially if you love dark academia. It is devastating, but again in the most beautiful way, and it's just everything that I love about dark academia is in this book, and everything that I don't love about dark academia isn't in this book. The back says, Jean is a lonely, introverted intellectual. Phineas was a handsome, taunting, daredevil athlete. What happened between them at school one summer during the early years of World War II is the subject of a separate piece. It is brilliant. Please read it. The next category is a book for people who love or hate Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, I am unfortunately one of those people who, I don't hate Frankenstein. I never want to say I hate a book, but I don't love a Frankenstein. And I love this book. You will also love this if you love Frankenstein. If you didn't love Frankenstein, this book is what I wanted from Frankenstein, but I didn't get. And that is The Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov. So I love Russian literature. You guys know I talk about Russian literature all the time on my channel, and The Heart of a Dog is hilariously crazy and weird and brilliant and insane, and just, it is everything that I wanted from Frankenstein that I didn't get. This story is about a doctor and a professor and how they take the pituitary gland and the testicles of a recently deceased man and they put them in the body of a dog, and how the dog becomes part man and how it just creates utter chaos and just devastates their entire lives and just creates such ruin, and how they basically lose control of this creature that they create. So it reminds me so much of Frankenstein, but of the things that I didn't love in Frankenstein. There were parts of Frankenstein that I was just trudging through, that I thought she was going on and on and on, and it was taking me so long to read and so long to get through. And what I love about The Heart of a Dog is that it's so fast-paced. Something is happening on every single page. You just keep wanting to turn it, and it's so slim. You will read it. I read it in one sitting. You will read it so quickly. You will always stay engaged. You will never want to put it down. With Frankenstein, I wasn't compelled to pick it up. Maybe my opinion will change because that was a few years ago that I read Frankenstein. Maybe I would like it more now, but The Heart of a Dog is everything that I wanted Frankenstein to be, and everything that it wasn't. If you love Frankenstein, if you love the concept of creating a creature and how that could go horribly wrong, you will love this. If you don't love the monotony of Frankenstein and the length of Frankenstein, then you will also love this because it is so fast-paced, so gripping, so chaotic, so insane. Bulgakov is so great at making you think, what the hell? Like, the whole time I was reading this book, I just kept thinking to myself, what the hell? What the hell's going on? This is insane. This is so bizarre. I have no idea what I'm reading, but I'm loving it. This is so weird, but I'm loving it. That if you want a weird book, this is it. And I can't recommend it enough. It is just insane and hilarious and amazing. The next category is books for people who love atmospheric settings and writings. And the first book that I have is more contemporary, and that is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This is her second most recent publication after The Four Winds. And The Great Alone, it takes place in Alaska, where the setting of Alaska really feels like its own character. We have 24-hour days and 24-hour nights, and we are following this young girl who, her father is a prisoner of war, and her mother and her have a very close relationship, but her father is dealing with PTSD and how that is influencing their dynamic, their family dynamic, and how that influences the main character. My favorite part about this book was how Alaska is its own character and how it was so atmospheric, and you feel like the setting of Alaska and where they're living and how the Alaskan wilderness setting, town, community, how it affects their family dynamic, how it affects her father's PTSD, how everything kind of revolves around the setting of Alaska. I love when a setting feels personified. I love personification just in general, when an object that isn't real is personified. I love it. Clara and the Sun, actually, that is a big part of Clara and the Sun that I'm loving currently. But yes, I adore this book. I think it is also devastating. There is some violence in this book. There is a lot of hope and heartbreak, and just, I adore this story. I think it's perfect for this time of year. So beautifully atmospheric. The next book is also atmospheric, and I think it should be read in or near a graveyard, if at all possible, and that is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Great Expectations first takes place in a graveyard, so that's why I think it should be read in or near a graveyard. Great Expectations is my favorite Charles Dickens book. If you are not interested in Charles Dickens, I still really recommend you read Great Expectations. If you love Charles Dickens and haven't read Great Expectations, what are you waiting for? It is amazing. Please do it. This is so atmospheric, so spooky and gloomy, and keeps you quite on edge. I've read quite a lot of Dickens's earlier works and haven't loved them. I love Great Expectations because I think it is Dickens at his best. We have this character of Miss Havisham. I'm sorry about the lighting, by the way. The sun is going behind a tree right now, and the leaves are blowing, and it's getting all wonky. Anyway, we have Miss Havisham, who is this ghostly woman who has never changed out of her wedding dress after being left at the altar. She doesn't move out of this one room. The room is covered in cobwebs. The clock is always at 9:15 or 9:15, something with 9 and a quarter. And we also have this convict who is in shackles. We have this orphan who is treated horribly. We have so many elements that I think is perfect for the autumnal season, perfect for spooky season, and this story always kept me on the edge of my seat, and I was just hooked, completely hooked from page 1. Dickens at his absolute best. The next two books are for people who want to be cozy, and in particular to be read with a nice warm beverage in your hands. The first one is Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. This book is the epitome of coziness. Her descriptions of nature are the most beautiful I have ever read, the most vivid. They leap off of the page. You feel like you leap into the story, and the way that she writes about nature is just so exquisite and so unlike any other person. Her attention to detail in terms of describing the setting, through Anne, she gives different names to different trees and different places in the countryside, and the way that she writes about the setting is so cozy. And the whole plot of Anne, who is an orphan, gets adopted by this brother and sister, and how Anne creates a lot of havoc for herself and in her own life. But what I love is the friendships that are developed in this story, the family dynamic between her and the Cuthberts. It is just the epitome of comfort, the epitome of coziness. It will just leave you with such a warm feeling of love and friendship and family and heart and beauty, and everything that Ellen Montgomery captures in this book will just leave you feeling so warm and like she just gave you a nice big hug. So I love Anne of Green Gables. I also love the miniseries Anne with an E. Cannot recommend it enough, also perfect for this time of year. Then the last cozy read is The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I recently read this for a 24-hour readathon with my best friend Emma. She recommended that I read it because she knew that I would love it, and I do, and now she and I have such a love for this book together. And The Wind in the Willows is perfect for this time of year. The way that Kenneth Grahame writes about the setting and their homes and just the adventures that these animals go on, it will give you such a sense of coziness. And to give you a perfect example, I will just read you the first few sentences. because it will just make you feel cozy right from the very start. So it starts with Chapter 1, The Riverbank. The mole had been working very hard all the morning, spring cleaning his little house. First with brooms, then with dusters, then on ladders and steps and chairs, with a brush and a pail of whitewash, till he had dust in his throat and eyes, and splashes of whitewash all over his black fur, and an aching back and weary arms. Spring was moving in the air above and in the earth below and around him, penetrating even his dark and lowly little house with its spirit of divine discontent and longing. Just the way that Kenneth Grahame writes this book with such lyrical descriptions and such beauty, such life. He gives so much life to these animals and to the pots and pans and the kitchen. And what I love and what Emma loves also about Dickens is how Dickens makes the ordinary extraordinary and how he personifies. Kenneth Grahame beautifully personifies everything in this story, and you almost feel like the river comes to life, and you feel like the pots and pans come to life. I cannot recommend it enough, especially for this time of year. It does begin in spring, but I think it's perfect for autumn. Then the last category is a book perfect for any season. And this is for people who just love to read, who love books. I had to put it in there somewhere. You guys, if you know me, you know I have to talk about it. So this book is perfect for any season, perfect for any person ever on the face of the earth. If you like to read, hopefully you'll like this book. And that is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. My favorite book on the face of the earth. It really is perfect for any season because it just captures life in all of its forms, and it has so many elements that I talked about here in this book, especially the atmosphere, the way that Tolstoy just creates this world. He makes it come to life. He makes you feel like you are in the story. On every single page you are just transported, and it's everything you could want in any season. Wow, it just got really dark because of that branch. Anyway, so I had to throw in Anna Karenina. I had to throw it in there somewhere. It had to happen. It happened. I did it. And now we can move on. Anyway, so how many books was that actually? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. 24 because I don't have Macbeth. Those are 24 autumnal books that I think are perfect for this time of year. Hopefully everyone can find something in here. I tried to make this as genre-defying as possible, so there's a book for anybody, and I hope that this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed, and I would love to know what books you also recommend for this time of year as well. I hope you're having a fantastic start to the autumnal season, and that you're excited to read. I feel like this season is one of my favorite reading seasons, and I can't wait to keep reading. So anyway, I hope you're having a fantastic day, and happy reading!